The Infinite Spark of Being is completely supported by listeners like you. No ads, no sponsors, just your support. If you want to help keep this going, there are 3 support tiers on Patreon for $10 a month, $15 a month, and $20 a month. No locked content, just a way to say I value this. You can also visit the website to check out books, merch, one-on-one sessions with me. Just click the About button, learn a little bit more about who I am and what I have to offer. And don't forget the YouTube page. That has the podcasts as well as binaural beats that help with meditation, rest, and sleep. So thank you for your support. Let's get started. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today we're walking into territory that has been the subject of books, documentaries, poorly produced YouTube documentaries, Instagram rants, basement rants, and candlelit rituals for centuries, and that's the Freemasons. Now, this isn't a history lesson. I realize that many of you know far more than I do about the Freemasons. You are experts. You have watched all of the YouTube footage. You have gotten into the deep, dark nooks and crannies of Reddit to learn about the Freemasons. And this definitely is not a sensational expose on secret societies. This episode is about personal meaning. This episode is about why and how we relate to these mysteries, to these conspiracies. It's about symbols. It's about discipline, legacy, loyalty, and maybe the parts of yourself that you've left unexplored, the pieces of you that you won't look at. Why you won't look at them, we'll get into that too. And on a personal note, my father was a 32nd degree Freemason in the Scottish Rite. He loved me very much and would do anything within his power to protect me. But he never, ever told me a single secret. In fact, he would just make jokes. At his weakest, on his deathbed while dying in agony, I asked him one last time. And in a very faint, raspy voice, he said the same thing that he has said to me for 30 years at that point. We sacrifice virgins. So, what I do know is that he took those vows seriously, obviously, even to his death. So let's get into it. The Freemasons, guardians of ancient wisdom, or architects of control. Up front, I would like to do a little housekeeping. I've switched podcast platforms, so please let me know if anything is off, if you're having trouble getting the episodes where you usually do. I'm very nervous about this for some reason, so please keep me posted. Also, I have a YouTube comment here to take a look at, which will actually benefit the entire episode, believe it or not. I won't say what I'm assuming is this gentleman. I'm assuming it's a gentleman's name. But he says here, now this is in reference to the Bill Cooper episode last week, 43.11 mins, that's short for minutes, of absolute horse shit, another new age grifter fleecing the sheeple. To which I replied, thanks for listening. I'm glad I could shepherd you. See, through the episode. First of all, come on. Sheeple? Grifter. This is usually said by somebody who thinks that they know, right? I spend hours, days actually on these podcasts, and all you can do is parrot some fucking dickwad terminology that you heard on TikTok being repeated by some angry divorced middle-aged dad with wraparound sunglasses that's not allowed to see his kids anymore. Just, be original, be specific.
Grifters and sheeple, you're all sheeple. I'm the only one that knows because I'm the only one that sits here with my nose in a screen reading Reddit for 24 hours a day.
You're the... Yeah, okay. So Krishnamurti, Jaddu Krishnamurti is a philosopher rather. Sorry. Trying to play with my dry lip. but he said something, and it was the first book I ever got of his. And he said, and keep in mind at the time, like eyeballs deep in punk rock. Once you leave the mainstream, you just create another mainstream, right? So you go from being one of those sheeple to being that other kind of sheeple. Just don't forget that. And judging from the name of this person's account, he's a big fan of Bill Cooper and probably of that human slug named Jordan Maxwell. He probably didn't think I knew who Jordan Maxwell was. And judging from the content of this gentleman's page, he's a really, really, really big fan of Bill Cooper. You know, like I said, you break out of one mainstream, you escape these sheep to become another one. And look, if I was this guy, I wouldn't like me either. I get it. And I know because I've been him. I understand that. However, he's really going to hate this episode. And he's going to it's going to show up in his feed because I'm going to hashtag it Bill Cooper. And I know that this person probably can't resist listening to this. But I was afraid to do the episode on Bill Cooper because I was going to have to essentially come out as a supporter of Alex Jones and Bill Cooper. But apparently I'm not a big enough supporter. It's not bordering on a fetish like some people, right? But it gets me thinking about something that might be beneficial to address here. Since this week we're again talking about conspiracies, Freemasons, all that. But I never want to be someone who just points to a conspiracy, right? And doesn't give a lesson with it, that doesn't give you anything actionable, right? Or a way to relate differently to some stressor in the world. I always want to attempt to be helpful, right? I never just want to go, it's the aliens, the Jews, and it's a cabal, and if the Rothschilds are just you know, I never want to just be one of these people standing in a Radisson conference room screaming about why Catholicism, Satanism, and the Masons are linked together. And again, dude, I love that stuff. I'm so into it. I'm probably more knowledgeable on it than this individual would like me to be. You know, it's always, men are interesting. And we're going to get into this because men always believe that, what's it saying, that they can drive, that men believe they're good at driving, fucking, and fighting. And often find out they're not good at least one of them. But they always, you know, me at least, I said this to a client once, that life is always going to be difficult for us because we believe we're the smartest person in the room. I was the dumbest person in the room, the least intelligent person in the room most of my life, all through my childhood, due to certain factors, and just obnoxiously made sure that would never happen again. But I get really deep into conspiracies. I love them. And I spent a lot of years just railing against things and realizing that all I'm doing is boring the fuck out of everyone. And I'm also just making excuses as to why my life isn't working out the way I want it to. Right. And we're going to get into, again, what that is. And so let me offer you this little explanation. Well, it's not little. It's my podcast. I can talk about it as long as I want. But much to the dismay of my colleagues when I was working in the field of mental health and drug addiction, I have a little theory, and it's called the rule of innies and outies. And it goes like this. Women have an innie and men have an outie. Some of you have already caught on. Gals point inward and fellas point outward. And for you incels out there, and apparently there are some listening to this podcast, that is a reference to girls having what's called a vagina and boys having a penis, right? And the arrangement of these organs kind of dictates how men and women see certain things in the world. Now, this is just my experience in dealing with humans and minds and all that, and doing experiential stuff with people and seeing how they react to things. But what I find is that women tend to internalize things, right? They point inward. A gal might think that she's where she is in life because she's not good enough, and if they were better or prettier, things would go better. Now, and again, this isn't across the board, right? Just saying. Now, men, on the other hand, we tend to externalize our problems. We blame the world, the president, those other people, our ex-wives, our current wife, secret societies, the kids, essentially everything that's not them gets blamed, right? So I'd like to bring number 5 of the ACOA laundry list to your attention. ACOA is adult children of alcoholics or adult children of dysfunction. But it goes like this. We live life from the viewpoint of victims and are attracted by that weakness in our love and friendship relationships. This has a lot to do with conspiracy theory. And again, I'm not dismissing conspiracies. I believe them. I'm quite certain of a few, right? I consider myself on the side of conspiracy theories. However, or on the side of those that are all in, right? But I do understand the danger in this stuff, right? And I always want, like, ultimately, like, regardless of whether there's, reptilians running things, we still have to work on ourselves, right? Like the Rothschilds can be in charge of everything, but we still have to worry about the soul, right? And if you're somebody that believes that these people can affect your soul, well, you should work on that. But the point is to be here and work through this stuff so that you can refine the soul. And let me read this again. We live life from the viewpoint of victims and are attracted by that weakness and our love and friendship relationships. Now, we live our life from the perception. We perceive ourselves as victims. What does perception mean? The way we regard, understand, and interpret things. Perfectly subjective. And we are attracted by that weakness, the similar perceptions. When people perceive us as victims, we are attracted to that. Not that we're attracted to other victims, but we're attracted to others that see us as victims. We're attracted to that in our love and our friendship relationships. Okay. So, being as of June 1st, I will have been in a male body for 49 years. I will speak to the male experience. That being said, my true expertise is actually as a reptilian hybrid Illuminati member, as a high-ranking Luciferian, and as an expert New Age fleecer. We live our life from the viewpoint of victims, yada, yada. How does that work for men? Well, since my problems are mostly external, I am clearly a victim of society. I don't have internal problems. My biggest problems are external. If this would all get sorted out, my internal would work out. If I could just move the chair under the window in my prison cell, it would feel like home. But the reality is eventually it just starts to feel like prison again. If you would have voted for my guy, I'd pay less taxes and I'd make the millions that I'm so clearly entitled to. If it weren't for all of these external forces, I'd make more money. I'd drink less. I'd get high less. I'd be an all-around more successful man. But I can't do that because all of you are in my way. And I can prove that. Let me tell you how I can prove that. Because every job that I get, the boss is an asshole. And every woman I meet's a fucking bitch that doesn't believe in me. So if I'm the problem, where did all these assholes come from? Right? Then some other fellas go, yeah, me too. I have the same experience. And so a Facebook group is born. Feedback loop. It's probably Freudian slip there. Or a political party or conspiracy is born out of that, right? Or worse, we start a fucking religion. So there's our friendship connection. Now, the romance piece of this is typically this person will find a woman who's afraid of being alone. And since she's so afraid of being alone, she will co-sign on the belief that the world is against him. And that if it weren't for his shitty childhood, his mother, his father, he'd be more successful. Essentially, it's a victim looking for confirmation bias. And that's why men are more into conspiracy theories than women. Well, actually, I think women get interested, but it's for something different. It's because their nature is to protect the tribe, to warn others, that kind of stuff. Whereas some fellas, conspiracies beat the shit out of taking personal responsibility. And again, I know this because I've been there. My cousin Katie is one of the deep, she's fine. COVID turned her into a conspiracy fan like me. But I think that, the reason she is fascinated by this stuff is probably because, she's a lady and has this protective, we got to warn the people kind of thing. But this is an important thing to look at, right? Why are you interested? I've had to look at this. Again, I'm not saying this because I haven't done it. Like, why does it upset you? I mean, sure, some of the stuff that happens in this world due to, a cabal and conspiracy shit, it's awful, but it's not going away. So that means you have no choice but to work with the way you relate to these things. And that doesn't mean that we become okay with it, but we relate to it differently. And that means something different to everyone. So let's get into more of the Freemason stuff. I've been interested in the Freemasons since before I was told there was a conspiracy there. It was something I was around. I thought it was interesting. My dad was a Mason. He let me play with his ring, and I just thought the symbol was neat. It's a symbol that you don't see often that was on his ring. In fact, I never, I think it's a deep cut. But I was really interested in it. Unfortunately for me, I didn't know that my dad was actually involved in a shadowy cabal that was running the world. So let's start with, my reptilian father and his shadowy cabal. So my dad was a welder. He owned a fabrication company that he actually started in secret. See, he was a secretive kind of guy, while working as a foreman at a submarine manufacturer called Perry Submarine. He eventually got a contract with the largest builder in South Florida. He left the submarine builder and took half the welders with him. Well, every day I remember him coming home and he had sweat through his leather belt. Though he was the owner of this company, he worked with these guys, right? He didn't believe that the boss was exempt from the labor that needed to be done. We had friends, family that all worked with my dad and for him. He was quiet most of the time, but he had a wild streak. He once shot the radio in the shop with a Ruger 357 Blackhawk, because my cousin Neil kept turning off the country music and playing rock music. And he would do this every time. Even if my dad left to go to the bathroom, Neil would pull this shit. So my dad just shot the fuck out of the radio, and that was that. My dad was involved with numerous shootouts, which is where he acquired that Blackhawk in the first place. Fun fact. He'd get in bar brawls. We'd have to go pick him up in the middle of the night from jail. Keith was a wild boy. That's my dad's name. I'm Junior. Well, one morning, my mom and I are getting dressed to go to Sunday school. We're going to go to church. And I asked my dad, I said, why don't you ever go to church with mom and I? And he said, son, the man upstairs and I have a special understanding. Well, the older I got and the more stories I heard, the more I think that statement meant something, that he wasn't just trying to get this kid off his back. He was trying to tell me something. What that something was, who knows, but maybe this stuff is linked. I don't know. Maybe he was a lot more spiritual than I thought. The more I learned about the reality of the Masons, the more I realized my dad had a deep spiritual belief. Now, let me say this up front. I believe the missing link in most religious traditions, or at least the traditions that I've been a part of at various times in my life, is the understanding of allegory, right? The people that believe that the Freemasons are somehow satanic racist pagans are probably the same people that are still looking for the Ark and are concerned with proving that the Shroud of Turin had something to do with the crucifixion of Jesus. Or the shroud, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it's not Jesus. We don't know. But I feel like I have to say, I believe the Shroud of Turin, especially the new shit they found about it. Fascinating stuff. Anyway. But these are the same types of personalities that need their religious, spiritual, and political beliefs and conspiracies to be objectively true and real. And worse than that, they need their beliefs, their religious beliefs, political points of view, conspiratorial beliefs to be objectively true and real for everyone around them, for us, right? That's dangerous. And worst of all, it's fucking irritating. So you take the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana, for instance. Like, I don't care whether or not any of it is objectively true or whether there's a historical record of talking monkeys and bears that battled a demon, or any of these massive battles, or if you're an ancient aliens dipshit, if there's actual Vimanas, it doesn't matter. What matters, well, it does matter because we can have infinite, shut up. What matters is the lesson, the allegory. I spent years wrestling with all that shit when it came to things like the Gita, right? Because I'd have these teachers like, this is true, this is real. And I'm like, okay. And that changed when I met a teacher that pointed out the allegory, right? Like, I no longer need Krishna to have been a living man that was actually an emanation of God. I don't need Arjuna to have been a great warrior with 4 brothers that once lived. I don't need the Battle of Kurukshetra to be a historical event, because if that were the case, then the Bhagavad Gita is just a transcript with really good life information in it, right? When it's an allegory and when Arjuna's fears and questions represent the inner dialogue of a human being struggling with the pain of life or the pain of the past, when Krishna's words are the words of my own divine mind trying to do or trying to get me to do what needs to be done, right? When his words are my higher self telling me what to do, but it's just hard sometimes, that's when the Bhagavad Gita hits home. That's when the Bible makes sense. That's when it opens you and you start to become a more even-keeled person that's less prone to wild anger, anxiety, and fear. That's when it's the words of the divine. And that's not some, divine message that's coming from somewhere else, but the divine message that's coming from within you. That's the lesson of the Gita, that the chariot is the body. Arjuna and Krishna are both inside the chariot, so to speak, the body, so to speak, right? That this message that Krishna, the message of yoga, of life that's being enunciated to Arjuna is coming from within Arjuna, right? The whole idea that Arjuna had known Krishna his whole life and didn't know that he was God, right? It's the allegory of our inner dialogue, our inner self. So I think understanding that most things were passed down that way helps when we look at things like the Masons. And it wasn't about necessarily hiding information from the powers that be because they're afraid people would become too powerful, or from the uninitiated. But the reality is that we learn best through parables, through stories. We always have. And since we all learn differently, there needs to be a lot of different ways to teach the same truth, the same thing, different stories, right? So here's just the basic rundown. The Freemasons, as we understand them today, likely emerged from the guild of operative Freemasons in the Middle Ages, not the Anunnaki, people who were literally building the cathedrals and the castles of Europe. These were highly skilled craftsmen. Many of them traveled between job sites since there was this mobility, they developed these kind of signs and symbols and rituals to identify each other and protect their knowledge. But over time, especially in the 1600s and the 1700s, these operative Freemasons gave way to what was called speculative Masons. People who weren't stonemasons per se at all, but used the symbols of architecture to teach these moral and spiritual lessons. So that's interesting to me. They weren't just building temples outside, they were building temples inside. We also see that there are and were levels to this shit, as the kids would say. And that was conveyed to me on multiple occasions by my dad, that all Masons weren't the same. He was actually very keen to point that out. So, that's where kind of the esoteric stuff starts to creep in, right? The square and compass, the rough and perfect ashlar, the blazing star, these weren't just cute little icons. They were maps. They were internal maps. And if you've been around the infinite spark of being at all, you know how I feel about spiritual systems, right? They are roadmaps of consciousness. It's not just belief systems. So Freemasonry became this spiritual fraternity of builders, not of stone, right? But of character, of virtue, of men. And something that needs to be understood is that at this time, the people that lived in these castles were in their position, or believed to be in this position, due to divine order, right? And this is similar to the system in India, that you are in this position because God wants you there, which makes it a big responsibility. So regardless of what your college educated and Bridgerton brain thinks of that, if you were living in those times, it was very real and it was important. So cathedrals, churches, castles were all very important buildings. They needed to be strong, well built, so there was this air of holiness around these things. So naturally, the men that were building them needed to be of a certain caliber. So yes, the building of these structures was a spiritual practice, right? It was holy. Regardless of the country or continent, the men building these temples saw it as a holy act, and they took it very seriously. So please don't confuse these men with today's general contractors. Please. They're not the same, especially the jackwagon that did our shower. So, I think that this is an important thing to know. And I realize that this doesn't jive with the conspiracy end of it. Or I don't know, maybe they're infiltrated later by demonic, whatever. But there's nothing worse than, someone that says something that bumps up against or pushes back on a conspiracy that we're all in on. But like I've said before, if you're interested in truth, then you have to be willing to let go of the side of the pool and swim out to the deep end, right? You need to be willing to get lost in the desert, to get exiled to the forest. It's very important. And I'm not saying any of this is any more true or real than, Jordan Maxwell and a Radisson screaming about a cabal, but, I'm just offering this thing. Okay? I'm more interested in what this does for us, not what it does to us, to be trite and annoying. Now, here's something interesting to note. There is no single Freemason dogma, but there are themes. They're big themes. They believe in a supreme being, which they call the great architect of the universe, but that's meant to be vague. It could be Yahweh, Allah, Krishna, the Tao, whatever your concept of the infinite is. They require belief, not agreement, but belief. These are two very different things. Agreement is how most of us were introduced to God. If you agree to be a good boy or a good girl, then you'll get a special place once all of this hellish suffering is over. Or worse, if you're good, God will keep all the bad things away. Sure, there's belief there. I guess you have to believe that. But if your relationship with God starts out with fear, the fear of what's going to happen if you don't believe, then you're entering into an agreement. Or worse, it's like a transactional agreement with God. We even see it today, right? My path is the only path. This is the only way to fix this. This is the only way to fix that, right? Your mental health is this. And you hear it from everyone, from a fucking pleated khaki therapist to some beady-eyed megachurch pastor to a yoga teacher. A lot of these yoga teachers often seem to be bottomless pits of misinformation, or just kind of a never-ending fountainhead of greeting card spirituality that's more interested in feel-good vibes and the actual truth that could possibly lead to spiritual development. But the Masons, they gather around a shared table with different names for God. That alone could teach a few people something about humility. And if it's not different names, just think of it as like different ideas. I can guarantee you everyone in a hall has a different idea of this thing, of the great architect. They also emphasize moral development. They emphasize charity, education, self-discipline. These are values that, frankly, we could all benefit from, whether you're into ancient rituals or not. There's also the concept of progression through degrees. You don't just join and become a Master Mason overnight. You earn it. You move through the entered apprentice degree all the way up to the Master Mason. And then in other branches, like when my dad was in the Scottish Rite or the York Rite, they have even more degrees, right? You're just not handed enlightenment. You build it like a temple, right? Your body is a temple. Are we starting to see this golden thread here, right? A lot of times these temples are laid out like the human body. There's something here. It's like the human body is a fractal of a fractal, right? We're dealing with fractals now. This is very interesting stuff to me. And that's what speaks to me about Masons, that there's degrees, there's levels, even within, everything I've practiced or been involved in. There's the basic bullshit you tell somebody who just walks in, but the more time you spend there, you realize there's layers, right? But the Masons, it's just not an instantaneous download of knowledge. It's earned. It's earned through work. And I mean that literally. The word mystery comes from the Greek word mysterion, which means initiation. You don't just get the sacred. You don't just get the mystery or the truth of the mystery even, right? If God's a mystery, you don't just get that. You're initiated into a school of attempting to understand it. You earn it through discipline, practice, patience. I mean, we live in this culture that thinks that if you pay enough money, right, you could go down to Peru, take ayahuasca for 10 days, eat fish and rice, and you'll come back a better person. Everyone will love you. You won't get a divorce. Grandma won't die. And I hear it all the time, but there's no integration, none. That's why they go right back to being, as Pema Chodron would call it, their same old shitty self. Well, if I just went to a 10-day meditation retreat, nope. That's a great start, a great introduction. But when people are doing these things, they're just having an experience. They're not integrating a new way of thinking or living. They're spiritual tourists. They show up, they take pictures, and they go home. They don't want to become a local. That's a lot of work. So in all of these paths, they go up the same mountain. But nonetheless, there are paths, and paths take time to travel, right? I mean, it's usually after a few years that you find out that the path that you're on has no destination, right? It's never over. You find out that you're on a journey, that you're not on a quest. But either way, it's not going to happen in 10 days at a resort in South America. It's a great starting point, but you have to do the work. So let's go ahead and get into the real reason you're all here. Are the Freemasons part of some grand global conspiracy? Are they pulling the strings? Are they, behind the world governments and collapsing economies? Are they launching these wars? And I get it. They use secret symbols, and that's fucking weird for everybody. And they meet behind closed doors. They have presidents, poets, prime ministers among their ranks. And of course, people are going to ask questions. And some of those questions are valid. Secret power is dangerous. And anytime a group of people gain influence without transparency, it opens the door for manipulation. And some of you just thought the Trumps and the Democrats and all that. But I like to bring it a little closer, right? For instance, some of you are in charge at work and you're part of management or some other fucking thing. And you also meet behind closed doors, right? You don't tell the employees everything. I mean, fuck, they don't need to know how the sausage gets made or that it might not be getting made. And how about that pre-meeting, the one that you have beforehand so that you can all be sure you're on the same page and get your story straight before Bill shows up, right? With his list of complaints from the staff. You have separate rules that apply to management rather than these common wage workers. They don't need to know everything. They don't need to know how close they are to their paycheck bouncing or that the company is about to be sold to some other group of fucking megalomaniacs. But hey, it's not a secret society. It's just business. That's how business is done. It's different for you. You're not a secret society. Come on. But here's the thing. I'm not here to tell you what's true, what's not true, how to do anything. I'm here to help you reflect on your relationship to these things, right? Why are we so obsessed with the idea that there's a group of people out there controlling everything? Well, sometimes that belief is a trauma response. And this kind of takes us back to God for a moment. It's better for some people to believe that if they hold their mouth just right, if they say all the special things and attend the magical ceremony on Sunday where they pretend to eat the meat of Christ and drink his blood, that they will be protected from life. Remember the agreement from earlier, right? Agreement versus belief. So let me get this straight. So if I come here on Sunday and do this really long ritual and speak and act as if I believe this, then in the end, I'll be spared, right? And trust me, it's better to believe that you can appeal to a higher power for protection, right? It's much harder to believe or to know that you have that power, because again, that puts the onus on you, right? It's always better to believe that there's a large group of people out there preventing you from getting ahead, rather than again putting the onus on yourself. It's always easier to believe that there is a powerful group of people out there pulling the strings, because if there's not, then that means that life really is this chaotic, or that you are somehow responsible for the shit on your side of the street. And this is the bravery required to step outside of the template. Remember, from, I think it was 2 episodes ago, I don't know, how convenient it is to have a registered set of beliefs, a dogma. Then you don't, that's safer than it is to find out that there's no fucking guardrails, right? Or have to refigure it out, or again, wander in the desert, or exile yourself to the dark forest of not knowing anymore, right? And as a fellow conspiracy guy, sometimes conspiracy is a way to make the world feel ordered again. At least someone's in charge, right? At least there's a Klaus Schwab. Relax, I know he's not in charge of the World Economic Forum anymore. It's got a great name. And looks like a supervillain. So here's kind of the real question that we need to look at. Regardless of what's true, regardless of the reptilians and the Illuminati and the Luciferians and the Pope and the fucking whatever, what is your part in how your life is turning out now? Is it really the Illuminati's fault? Is it really the fault of the Freemasons? Or are you just being distracted by this stuff? Because whether the Freemasons are ancient guardians of spiritual wisdom, or a shadowy network of control, or just a bunch of guys in aprons eating cold fried chicken at a banquet, it doesn't change your obligation to show up, period. It's so easy to look outward and blame them, whoever they are, right? It's harder to look inward and ask, what patterns am I repeating? What lies have I accepted about who I am? What temple am I building within myself? In fact, who cares about the patterns that you're repeating? What are the words, ideas, philosophies, points of view that you are repeating? What's your mantra? Remember, mantra in Sanskrit means that which protects, or tool, or mind tool. So what tool are you using to build your inner temple? So let's get a little deeper into the symbolism. Freemasonry is covered in symbols: the square, the compass, the all-seeing eye, the trowel, the keystone, even a beehive, on and on. Each of them teaches a moral or philosophical lesson. You've got to remember, these men lived in an era when literacy wasn't guaranteed. So symbols were sacred language. They were mnemonic devices for deeper truths. Work hard, keep your word, help others, submit to something greater, a higher power. Even the rituals themselves are metaphors, right? Death and rebirth, blindfold and raising into the light. So let's really talk about symbols, and not just in a lazy Jordan Maxwell, it's all satanic way, but in a sensible way, the way they deserve to be discussed. Growing up in a Baptist church, we were subject to a lot of wildly silly kinds of ideas. And at one point, we were all given a book called From Rock to Rock. Now, I don't know if this is an official book, like a church sanctioned book. I think it's on Amazon. I looked it up and I think it's the same one. I didn't order a copy, but it was it was fucking stupid. One of the little nuggets in there, the band Kiss, right? KISS was an acronym for Knights in Satan's Service. ACDC, I can't really remember, but I think it was something about being gay, which is obviously satanic, being gay. And the peace symbol, which was the symbol for nuclear disarmament, not many people know that, but it was actually a cross with broken arms. And it said that the only person you're making peace with is the devil. Now, when you just start saying that all of these things are satanic and all of this is evil and that's all you see. When I was a kid, I was really into heavy metal, late 80s, early 90s. And I had a friend who went to rehab. Now, when you go to rehab in the 90s, you come out and you have to get rid of all of your clothes and your music and start over. And he went from having long hair and wearing black t-shirts and jeans jackets to having short hair and wearing polos. And one day he got on the bus and he gave me a bag of cassette tapes. And it was in the entire Anthrax catalog as well as Iron Maiden. Now, I had heard of these bands from reading heavy metal magazines, but I never listened to them. I didn't have older brothers and sisters that would give me things. My parents were not into rock music. They were too old for it, as they would say. They were more like country, bluegrass, big band. So I went home, and now this was the time when everything had a subliminal satanic message. If you play Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven backwards, it says Satan is your master. And you're going to hear it if you're listening for it. If you're going to go home and try that right now, I promise you that you'll hear something, but it's not real. I think it's called pareidolia, where humans will see things and I get maybe hear things that aren't really there. But I was listening to Anthrax's album, State of Euphoria. Still new to heavy metal, waiting for the big satanic thing to happen. And there's a song called Who Cares Wins. And there's this part where they say, and there but for the grace of God, and there but for the grace of God. And it's a song about overlooking homeless people. It's not a evil, bad song at all. It's about, hey, don't overlook homeless people. And I could have sworn I heard something satanic. My stomach turned. I got really scared. I stopped my tape player. I grabbed the tape cover and I started reading the lyrics, and I didn't read what I heard. But I knew that I'd heard something bad. So think about that, right? You start looking for all these numbers and these things, these satanic symbols, you're going to find them everywhere. The point is that you see or hear what you're looking for, right? Or what you're programmed to look for. I was programmed to look for that thing. If you're looking for satanic imagery, then sure, you'll see it. If you are a scared, if you are a scared small person, then you see threats everywhere, and if you're thoughtless enough, you will act as if, meaning that you will act scared, behave as a scared person behaves. And you will continue to see the world that way, right? If you're going to perceive yourself in this way, then you perceive that type of world. If you believe that you're powerless, right? If you believe that it's the fault of a satanic cabal that your life has worked out the way it has, and you act as if, talk as if, live as if, well, guess what? That's right. You'll get exactly the experience that you're looking for. Just go ahead and let that darkness hijack your fucking mind. And look, you're going to go wherever you're pointed. Meaning, if energy flows where the attention goes, and the attention is the pointer, the awareness, then what that is pointed at, what you're aware of, is where you're going to go. Where your attention is what you're going to be drawn to. So, Freemasonry is a symbolic tradition. It's not just a fraternity with secret handshakes and passwords. It's a system of inner work disguised as a construction site, right? Their symbols aren't random. They're tools, they're metaphors, they're maps. And, if you understand them, they don't just point to the secrets of a lodge, right? They point to the architecture of the self, of the soul, of your connection to God. I was once playing at a Knights of Columbus Hall in Orlando, Florida. Back then, punk bands did those sorts of things. While I was sitting at the bar, I was talking to the old man, the bartender there, and I was completely ignorant to a lot of this stuff. And he said, my dad's a Freemason. Well, he scowled at me, said they're a bunch of atheists, and walks off. So ignorance abounds, and just because a bunch of people believe that, it doesn't mean that I'm going to. A lot of people make the case for Freemasonry or any of these other groups being evil satanic cabals because a bunch of people believe that. Well, that's the thing you hate the most, right? The sheeple, right? So let's talk about these symbols. First of all, while I am simply a New Age grifter, a Luciferian and part of the reptilian agenda, I'm not a Freemason. I'm just the son of a satanic atheist Illuminati member, so please keep that in mind. So probably the most recognizable Masonic symbol would be the square that sits beneath the compass on top of, and there's usually the letter G in the middle. So I just realized some of you don't know what a square is. It's for measuring right angles. I'm not going to get into it any further than that, but there's a square and it's intersected by a compass and there's a G in the middle of it. So the square teaches morality, squaring your actions. It means aligning them with true virtue, right? Are you honest? Are you fair? Are you acting in alignment with your values when nobody's looking? That's what integrity is, right? The compass draws a circle around your desires. It's about self-restraint, keeping your ego, your desires, your reactivity in check. It's not about a repression. It's about spiritual boundaries. A lot of people get those things confused. They think that somebody is either oppressed or repressing something when they're just engaged in spiritual boundaries, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But together, all of those things symbolize a balance, right? Physical and spiritual, horizontal, vertical, outer, inner. And the G, people argue about that, but some say it stands for God, very simple. Others say geometry. And I think it's both. The divine order that runs through both the cosmos and calculation, right? That cosmos and math, science and mysticism, I don't know. But either way, it's a symbol that reminds us that the divine is found in structure, not just spontaneity, in building with intention. And next is every disempowered conspiracy theorist's favorite symbol, the all-seeing eye. We've all seen it on a dollar bill, but the eye of providence existed long before the Illuminati memes did. In Masonic symbolism, it represents the watchful eye of the great architect of the universe, right? What you might call God, source, or consciousness, big C. But here's how I kind of relate to it. I relate to it in the way that it's not about surveillance, like the concern of some meth head with foil over their windows. It's about awareness. It's a reminder that your thoughts, your actions, your inner life, they matter. And not because someone is spying on you, but because they are building something eternal with every choice you make. It's about not being judged, right? It's about being seen by yourself, capital S. Right? That eye is a symbol of the witness within, Sakshasi Bhava, right? If we're going to use yogic terms, it's the space in you that's always watching without attachment. And when you connect with that witness, that's when transformation begins, right? That's what we practice during meditation. And speaking of meditation, you'll find these next symbols in every lodge, right? It's the two pillars at the entrance, Boaz on the left and Jachin on the right. These come straight out of the Temple of Solomon, which is a central mystic image for Masons. Boaz symbolizes strength. Jachin symbolizes establishment or stability, right? Together they represent duality, masculine, feminine, mercy, severity, chaos, order. But there's a deeper meaning there when you walk between them. One symbolizes strength, one symbolizes establishment or stability. You walk between them. That's the path of the initiate. It's the same as the Taoist path between the yin and the yang, right? You see yin and yang symbol. It's not about the black side or the white side. It's the implied line between the two, or the middle way in Buddhism. The spiritual path isn't about picking a side. It's about integrating opposites, walking the razor's edge between doing and being, between discipline and surrender. We are not meant to be one-sided. We're meant to carry polarity and stand in that tension without collapsing. Another way to look at it is that if you're in a canoe, you're going down a river, if you paddle too much on the right, you're too active on the right side, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, that canoe is going to swing drastically to the left and get stuck in the bushes on the left. And if you paddle on the left and give all your attention to the left and get really active on the left side of that canoe is going to swing to the right and get stuck in the bushes on the right. And that's my little political statement for the day. Now, this next one, the rough ashlar and the perfect ashlar, is one of my favorites. An ashlar is a stone used in Masonry. The rough ashlar represents the unrefined human soul, crude, chaotic, full of sharp edges. The perfect ashlar is the finished stone, smooth, balanced, ready to fit into the temple. That's you, that's me, that's all of us, right? You come into this world with karmic gunk, old patterns, defensiveness, ego, wounds, and spiritual work, whether it's meditation, Masonic ritual, or journaling at your kitchen table, is the process of shaping yourself. It's not about perfectionism. It's about refinement, conscious chipping away, letting go of the parts that don't fit, releasing the depth of the soul so it can breathe, if I'm trying to be poetic. And this is something that no one can do this for you, right? Something you have to do for yourself. No priest, no guru, not even a 33-degree Mason. Right? You are the architect. In fact, you are the sculptor and you are the stone, right? You are the artist and the medium. The next one is the trowel. This is interesting. The trowel is a symbol of unity. I realize that some of you don't know what a trowel is. It's used to spread cement, okay? But it's used to spread the cement that binds the stones of the temple together. Symbolically, it represents brotherly love. To me, this is about spiritual service. You're not doing all this inner work just to become a shiny, polished little ashlar, right? Or asshole. You're doing it so that you can fit into something larger, so you can connect, contribute, support others. That's the real temple. Not a building, not even like a lodge. It's humanity, your community, your relationships, your partner, your neighbor, the barista who gets your coffee order wrong. The trowel asks, what are you doing to bind, not break? Right? What are you spreading? What are you doing? How are you holding it all together? Right? Or are you just not? Now, this next symbol is very esoteric, and it's called the blazing star. It's usually a 5-pointed star, often surrounded by these rays of light, and it represents divine light. It represents enlightenment, spiritual truth. Sometimes it's associated with Sirius, the dog star, which in ancient traditions across Africa and Egypt was thought to be the bringer of wisdom. In Masonry, it's the guiding light of consciousness, the thing you orient yourself by. So you have to ask, what's your blazing star? What's the truth in your heart that keeps showing up even when you ignore it? What's that thing in you that still believes even after all the trauma, the disappointment, the bullshit? Why are you listening to this? There's something in there that after all of this, you're still trying to make sense. And that's your blazing star. So you should follow it. It's a clue. It's this Floret Scoville shin. It's the branch. It's the olive branch, the site of land. You know, I don't know if this is a real quote or not, and I'm not going to look it up because I hope it's true and I think it's great. But supposedly, Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. Towards the end of his life, he said it should have been follow your blisters, which I love. Anyway, so no, these aren't just old-timey emblems embroidered into hats and aprons. These symbols, they're actually tools, they're lessons, they're mirrors. Every one of them is trying to tell you something, that you're not done yet, that you can shape yourself, that you're both the student and the builder, that you are part of something bigger, but it's only as strong as your ability to show up with love, presence, and some integrity. And the most sacred symbol, they don't sit on altars or get printed on dollar bills. They live in your daily choices. Those are real symbols. Your habits symbolize something. Your breath symbolizes something. Your thoughts symbolize something. Your relationships symbolize something. All of these things are like reflections of each other. Your habits, your breath, your thoughts, your relationships. The way you speak to your partner in the middle of a fight is a ritual. The way you treat your body when no one's watching, that is a symbol or symptom. The way you show up for your art, your path, your silence, that's real initiation. Now, I want to come back to my dad real quick. I loved him. I respected him. There's some admiration there, right? He was a 32nd degree Mason in the Scottish Rite. He wore the ring. He went to the meetings. He made the jokes. And he never, ever told me what went on behind those doors. And not because he didn't trust me, but because he had given his word. Right there, that is a kind of spiritual practice. How many people today are that loyal, that quiet, that capable of restraint? We live in a world where people share every opinion, every moment, every half-baked idea for likes and dopamine hits. But he took his vows and he honored them. That's something sacred, whether you like Freemasons or not. This reminds me of, it was either last week or I don't know, some episode. But I was making the point that most people don't believe in something enough to go knock on a door and tell someone about it, or to stand on a sidewalk in the hot South Florida sun with a bunch of books. And most people can't be quiet and sit with a practice. They have to tell you about it before they've even engaged with it long enough to find out if it's the right thing for them. Right? Speaking of, just urging people and forcing things on them. I have a new book out. I've worked on it for 3 years. It's called Awake. It's out now. It's on Amazon. So yeah, go give it just go buy it. If you like this podcast, you're going to like the book. I actually did that for the guy that called me a New Age grifter. Anyway, so my dad's example reminds me that maybe the point isn't about what's hidden, but why it's hidden. So many things are sacred because they're not broadcasted, right? Some truths can't be shouted. They have to be earned. And while I may never know the content of those rituals or what was in these books or anything, actually, there weren't any books. He gave me a book one time, but it was missing paragraphs. But anyway, I know the content of my dad's character, and he's a Mason, a 32nd degree Mason that I knew very well. He had great character. And all paths have these hidden esoteric side quests. I've said this before, but one of my favorite things is when people are drawn to Buddhism, specifically Tibetan Buddhism, because they fancy themselves as this high-minded, pragmatic intellectual, and this God thing is just a bridge too far. But when they get deep enough into the game of Tibetan Buddhism, they find out that we have to take this colorful mound of buttery dough outside so we can do this ritual so the demons will leave us alone. I love them finding out about the weirdness of it. I really do. But that's, again, part of the deal. You're not privy to that because you showed up to an open house on a Sunday morning. It's one of those things that you don't find out till later, right? It's like Scientology and Xenu. So let's put this into context, something that you can actually use. So whether you care about Freemasons or not, there's a message. And the message is discipline matters, right? We don't build temples, internal or external, without consistency, without discipline. Symbols matter. You are always speaking the language of the subconscious, which is symbols. Even when you don't realize it, it all matters, right? Words are symbols. It's all symbols, right? Silence is powerful. Not everything needs to be shared, explained, or fucking posted. And mystery is medicine. You don't have to know everything to respect it. And maybe the most important thing is that you are already building something. Every thought, every action, every belief is a brick. The question is, what kind of temple are you building? Are you creating a sacred space within yourself, or are you just reacting to life and stacking up a bunch of rocks with no plan or intention? So I'm sorry we didn't get into the satanic ritual abuse, the sacrifices, or any of that. Again, I was never privy to them, but maybe that's why my dad lived after so many near-death experiences. Maybe that was the secret. I don't know. Anyhow, Freemasonry may be shrouded in secrecy, but the spiritual life always is. Because these deep truths, they aren't always hidden, but you got to get quiet to hear them, to find them, to realize them. So sometimes when people believe something's hidden, is it hidden, or are you just not shutting up long enough to fucking see it, hear it, feel it, whatever? So anyway, thank you for reminding me. I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If the infinite spark of being has brought you any value, consider supporting the work. You can join the Patreon for $10, $15, or $20 a month. It's a simple way to keep this project going with no ads, no fluff, just us. You can also head to theinfinitesparkofbeing.com for books, merch, one-on-one sessions with me. Just click the About button, learn a little bit more about what I do. Also, check out the YouTube channel for episodes and binaural beats that help with meditation, rest, and sleep. I love you. Thank you. Take care. See you next week.